I never thought I'd set foot in the Harrison building again. Yet here I stood, staring up at the gleaming 60-story tower that housed Harrison Global Industries, the company that had been my family's legacy for 3 generations, the company that had thrown me away like yesterday's trash. My name is Sofia Harrison, and 10 years ago, my own family kicked me out of the business I was born to inherit. The memories rushed back as I pushed through the revolving glass doors. I remembered running through these marble halls as a child, pretending I was already the CEO. Back then, my father would laugh, scoop me up in his arms, and tell me that one day, this would all be mine. What a lie that turned out to be. The security guard at the desk did a double take when he saw my ID. Ms. Harrison? I haven't seen you in 10 years, I finished for him, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I have a meeting with the board. He quickly buzzed me through, and I stepped into the private elevator that would take me to the top floor. As I watched the numbers climb, I thought about the last time I'd made this journey. I was 25 then, fresh out of my MBA, full of ideas about modernizing the company and taking it into the digital age. My father had just stepped down as CEO, and everyone assumed I would take his place. I was the eldest child after all, the one who'd studied business while my younger brother Oliver partied his way through college. The board meeting that day started like any other. I prepared a detailed presentation about my vision for the company's future, expanding into emerging markets, investing in sustainable technology, streamlining our supply chains. But I never got to show it. Instead, my father stood up and made an announcement that shattered my world. After careful consideration, he said, not even looking at me, the board has decided that Oliver will be taking over as CEO. The room spun. Oliver? My brother, who could barely handle his own checking account, who had never shown any interest in the business beyond using it to fund his lavish lifestyle. This can't be right, I said, my voice shaking. I'm the one who's been preparing for this my whole life. I have plans, strategies. Plans? Oliver smirked from across the table. You mean those ridiculous ideas about changing everything? This company doesn't need change, Sophia. It needs steady leadership. Oliver understands tradition, my father added. He'll maintain the Harrison way of doing things. I looked around the table at the board members, people I'd known my entire life. Most avoided my eyes. A few nodded in agreement with my father. Only Uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother, showed any sign of disagreement, but even he remained silent. The Harrison way? I stood up, anger replacing shock. You mean the way that's losing us market share every year? The way that's making us irrelevant while our competitors innovate? That's enough. My father's fist hit the table. This decision is final. Oliver will be CEO. You can either accept a position under his leadership or what? I challenged. Or you can leave. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I looked at Oliver, seeing the triumph in his eyes. He'd always been jealous of my relationship with the company, of how naturally business came to me while he struggled. Now he finally won. Fine, I said quietly, gathering my papers. I quit. Sophia, don't be dramatic, my father sighed. Just because you're not CEO doesn't mean. No, you don't understand. I cut him off. I quit everything. The company, the family, all of it. I'm done. I walked out of that boardroom with my head held high, ignoring the whispers behind me. By the time I reached the lobby, security was already waiting with a box of my personal belongings. They'd planned this. They'd known I wouldn't accept their decision. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at old family photos, trying to understand how it had all gone so wrong. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, most from my mother, begging me to reconsider, a few from Uncle Marcus expressing his sympathy. I ignored them all. Instead, I focused on the small leather-bound notebook in my hands. It had belonged to my grandfather, the man who built Harrison Global from the ground up. He'd given it to me on his deathbed, making me promise not to open it until I really needed it. There are secrets in here, Sophia, he'd whispered. Things about the company, about our family. Use them wisely. I kept that promise, carrying the notebook with me but never opening it. Now, with nothing left to lose, I broke the small brass lock and began to read. What I found inside changed everything. The notebook contained detailed records of my grandfather's early business dealings, including several that had never appeared in any official company documents. There were names, dates, account numbers, and most importantly, Details about a series of offshore holdings that no one else knew existed. My grandfather, it seemed, had set up a complex network of shell companies decades ago, companies that technically owned significant portions of Harrison Global's most valuable assets, companies that, according to the documentation in the notebook, he had quietly transferred to my name on my 18th birthday. I stayed up all night, poring over the contents. By morning, I had a plan. The next day, I withdrew every penny from my trust fund and booked a one-way ticket to Singapore. If my family wanted to push me out, fine. I would build something of my own, something so successful that they would regret ever doubting me. I spent the next decade doing exactly that. While Oliver ran Harrison Global the traditional way, which mostly meant maintaining the status quo and taking long lunches with old clients, I was building an empire in Asia. I started small, using my grandfather's connections to get meetings with investors. Within 2 years, I had founded Aurora Ventures, a technology investment firm that specialized in exactly the kind of innovation Harrison Global had rejected. I worked 18-hour days, lived on coffee and determination, and poured every ounce of energy into proving them wrong. While my brother appeared in society pages at charity galas, I was in startup offices and factory floors, identifying the next big technological breakthroughs. Year by year, Aurora Ventures grew. We funded revolutionary AI companies, backed sustainable energy projects, and invested in cutting-edge medical technology. Every success felt like a personal victory, a vindication of everything I tried to tell the board that day. I never looked back, never attended family events, never responded to the increasingly desperate messages from my mother about reconciliation. The only person I stayed in touch with was Uncle Marcus, who occasionally sent me updates about the company. And oh, what updates they were! Under Oliver's leadership, Harrison Global stagnated. They lost major contracts to more innovative competitors. Their stock price dropped steadily. Old clients began jumping ship to younger, more dynamic companies, many of which were backed by Aurora Ventures, though Oliver never made the connection. He was too busy enjoying his CEO title to notice that his sister was systematically dismantling his empire from halfway across the world. Then came the message I'd been waiting 10 years to receive. It was a Tuesday evening in Singapore. I was in my office, reviewing potential investments, when an urgent email arrived from Uncle Marcus. Sofia, they're finally realizing how badly they need you. Harrison Global is about to lose everything. Oliver's mismanagement has brought us to the brink of bankruptcy. The board is desperate to close a deal with Maxwell Corp, a $50 million investment that could save the company. But here's the thing they don't know yet. According to your grandfather's arrangements, that deal can't go through without your signature. You own controlling interest in the subsidiaries they're trying to sell. The board meeting is next week. They're going to find out soon. Thought you'd want to know. Uncle Marcus. I leaned back in my chair, a smile spreading across my face. 10 years of waiting, building, preparing for this moment. Finally, it was time to go home. I made a few calls, booked a first-class ticket to New York, and began reviewing the documents my grandfather had left me. Everything was exactly as he predicted. Harrison Global couldn't make any major asset sales without approval from the shell companies he'd set up. Companies that I legally controlled. My brother was about to learn a very expensive lesson about the true meaning of family business. The Harrison Global boardroom hadn't changed in 10 years. Same mahogany table, same leather chairs, same oil painting of my grandfather overlooking it all. But the people around the table looked considerably more worried than the last time I'd seen them. I watched through the glass walls as they filed in for the emergency board meeting. Oliver, now sporting gray at his temples, shifting papers nervously. My father, looking older and more tired than I remembered. The board members, their faces etched with concern. None of them knew I was waiting in the adjoining office with Uncle Marcus. They're about to present the Maxwell Corp deal, Marcus whispered. Should I tell them you're here? I shook my head, watching as Maxwell Corp's CEO, James Maxwell, entered the room with his legal team. Let them get through the presentation first. I want to see their faces when they realize. Oliver stood at the head of the table, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming on such short notice. As you know, Harrison Global has faced some challenges recently. I almost laughed at the understatement. Under Oliver's leadership, the company had lost 60% of its market value. Their stock was at an all-time low, Their major clients were jumping ship, and their once sterling reputation was in tatters. But today, Oliver continued, we have an opportunity to turn everything around. Mr. Maxwell has graciously offered to invest $50 million in exchange for our Asian manufacturing subsidiaries and technology patents. James Maxwell nodded graciously. We believe these assets align perfectly with our expansion plans. My father cleared his throat. The board has reviewed the terms, and we recommend moving forward immediately. If everyone's in agreement, we can sign today. That was my cue. I pushed open the boardroom door, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I'm afraid that won't be possible. The reaction was immediate. Oliver's face went white. My father half rose from his chair, then sank back down. Board members exchanged panicked glances. Sophia, Oliver's voice cracked. What are you doing here? I smiled, placing my briefcase on the table. Protecting my interests. Did you really think you could sell those subsidiaries without my approval? James Maxwell looked between us, confusion evident. I'm sorry, who is this? Sofia Harrison, I said, extending my hand. The actual owner of the assets you're trying to buy. That's ridiculous, Oliver sputtered. I'm the CEO. Those subsidiaries belong to Harrison Global. I pulled a stack of documents from my briefcase. Actually, they belong to Pacific Crown Holdings, Summit Enterprises, and Aurora Development Corporation. 3 companies that grandfather set up 30 years ago. Companies that I've legally controlled since I turned 18. The blood drained from my father's face as he recognized the names. Those were James' private holdings. He told me he'd dissolved them decades ago. He lied, I said simply. He knew exactly what would happen to the company if Oliver took over, so he made sure I had the power to protect his legacy when the time came. I distributed copies of the ownership documents. The board members pored over them, their expressions shifting from disbelief to shock as they realized the truth. This can't be legal, Oliver stammered. I assure you it is, I replied. My lawyers have verified everything. You need my signature to sell those assets, and I'm not signing. James Maxwell leaned forward, suddenly more interested. Ms. Harrison, perhaps we should discuss this privately. No need. I cut him off. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to make an announcement. I turned to address the board. Harrison Global is failing because it refused to change. While Oliver was maintaining tradition, the world moved on. But I've spent the last decade building something better. I pulled up Aurora Ventures' financial reports on the boardroom screen. My company now manages over $10 billion in technology investments. We're pioneering the innovations that Harrison Global rejected, the same innovations your clients are now demanding. The board members stared at the numbers in stunned silence. Even Oliver seemed temporarily speechless. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. Aurora Ventures will buy controlling interest in Harrison Global. We'll modernize its operations, expand its technology division, and restore its reputation. The company will survive, but under my leadership, not Oliver's. You can't do this, my father finally found his voice. The board would never. The board doesn't have a choice, I interrupted. Check your stock prices. While you've been in this meeting, Aurora Ventures has been buying shares on the open market. We already own 30%. Combined with my ownership of the subsidiaries, I have effective control. Oliver collapsed into his chair, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. You've been planning this all along. No, brother dear, you did this to yourself. I just waited for the right moment to step in and clean up your mess. I turned to James Maxwell. I apologize for wasting your time, Mr. Maxwell, but Harrison Global is no longer for sale. As Maxwell and his team gathered their things to leave, I surveyed the shocked faces around the table. These people had thrown me out, thinking they'd never need me again. Now their futures rested in my hands. The official announcement goes out tomorrow, I said. Oliver, you'll announce your resignation, citing personal reasons. Father, you'll retire from the board. The rest of you can either adapt to the new Harrison Global or tender your resignations. And if we refuse? Oliver challenged, but his voice lacked conviction. I smiled. Then I'll sell my subsidiaries to your competitors, piece by piece, until there's nothing left of this company but an empty building and some letterhead. Your choice. One by one, they nodded. Even my father, though it clearly pained him, gave a slight nod of acceptance. As they filed out of the boardroom, Uncle Marcus caught my eye and smiled. He'd been the only one who'd believed in me, who'd understood why I had to leave and build something of my own. I walked to the window, looking out over the city. The same view I'd dreamed about as a child. Now finally mine, not because of birthright or tradition, but because I'd earned it. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant in Singapore. Stock price already up 25% on takeover rumors. Investors excited about the merger. I smiled, remembering all those nights I'd worked while Oliver attended parties, all the deals I'd closed while he played golf with old clients. Every sacrifice, every lonely moment, every step back had led to this. The last person to leave the boardroom was my father. He paused at the door, looking older and smaller than I remembered. "Your grandfather," he said quietly, "he always said you were the one." I should have listened. "Yes," I replied, not turning from the window. "You should have." The door closed behind him with a soft click. I was alone in the boardroom where 10 years ago they tried to end my career. Now I stood here as the owner of $2 billion companies, proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they can't ignore. I picked up my grandfather's notebook from my briefcase, running my fingers over its worn leather cover. "Thank you," I whispered to his portrait on the wall. He'd given me the tools I needed, but I built something he never could have imagined. Tomorrow, the business world would be buzzing about the merger, about how Sofia Harrison, the exiled daughter, had orchestrated the biggest corporate takeover of the year, about how the sister they dismissed as worthless had become the savior they desperately needed. But tonight, I simply sat in my grandfather's chair, savoring the silence of victory. Sometimes revenge takes patience, planning, and a decade of quiet work. But when it finally arrives, it's worth every minute of waiting. I opened my laptop and began drafting the press release that would shake the business world. Harrison Global announces merger with Aurora Ventures. Sofia Harrison returns as CEO. The headline would shock the business world, but not as much as what would follow. Under my leadership, Harrison Global would become everything I'd envisioned 10 years ago: innovative, dynamic, and firmly focused on the future. Oliver had wanted to maintain tradition. Instead, he triggered a revolution, and I was just getting started.